All right, so today we're breaking down a piece of online commentary that absolutely blew up. It's all about a statement Vice President Kamala Harris made regarding Venezuela. This is really a story about how just one comment can set off a massive debate online, and it all gets tangled up in policy, politics, and, well, perception. Okay, so this is the quote that lit the fuse. Harris is on the record, right? She calls Maduro a brutal, illegitimate dictator. But then she pivots and calls the actions taken against him by the previous administration unlawful and unwise. And it's that specific phrasing that triggered the huge online backlash we're going to unpack.
So why the huge blow-up online? What was it about this statement that got so much attention? Well, according to the commentary we're looking at today, it all comes down to what they're calling a massive contradiction with her own administration's past moves. Let's get right into it. Right, so the central argument here, the main line of attack, is pretty straightforward: hypocrisy. The source commentary argues that there's this giant gap between what Harris said in that statement and a pretty significant policy her own administration had in place. And this is basically the whole case in a nutshell. On one hand, you have the administration putting up a $25 million bounty for Maduro. On the other hand, you have the vice president calling his capture unlawful. And to the people making this critique, this isn't some minor policy tweak. No, they see it as a complete 180-degree flip-flop. And, just to give you a sense of the tone here, this is a direct quote from the narrator of the source material. So they're not just saying, hey, this is inconsistent. They're going a step further, arguing the whole thing just makes absolutely no sense to them. But the critique doesn't just stop at that main charge of hypocrisy. The source commentary also takes aim at the specific justifications Harris gave for her stance. So let's break down each point she made and then look at the counterarguments that were presented. Okay, claim number one from Harris: taking action against Maduro doesn't make the U.S. safer, stronger, or more affordable. Basically, she's hitting three key areas where she says this action fails to deliver for Americans. Now, the source material pushes back hard on all three of those points. On safety, they argue that taking Maduro out is a win because it weakens his allies. We're talking Iran, Russia, and China. On strength, the argument is that a stable Venezuela under new leadership is a huge plus for America. And on affordability, this is a big one. They basically say if the U.S. had control of Venezuela's oil, gas prices could go down for everyone here. All right, Harris's second major point, according to the source, was that the former president was putting troops at risk with this kind of operation. And the rebuttal here is a really stark comparison. First, they point out that in this Venezuela operation, there were 0 casualties. 0. Then they immediately contrast that with the withdrawal from Afghanistan, which happened under the Biden-Harris administration, where 13 American service members were killed. The source uses this to pretty directly question her standing to talk about putting troops at risk. And the third big claim from Harris that gets challenged is this one: that the action is destabilizing a region. Now, this is where the counter-argument takes a really interesting turn. Instead of talking about Venezuela, the source completely pivots to U.S. border policy. They accuse the administration of destabilizing our own country by opening up the border, and they argue this has no benefit at home. Okay, so after laying out their case against Harris's logic, the commentary then shifts gears to show how this all played out online. They really focus on the public reaction and the backlash to her post. And to really get what they're talking about, you have to understand this piece of internet slang: ratioed. It's pretty simple, really. It just means a post gets way more angry or critical replies than it does likes or shares. It's basically a public sign that a big part of the internet does not approve. And here's a perfect example of the kind of comment the source video was highlighting. You see how it goes right back to that central point, the $25 million bounty versus her now saying the capture was unlawful. This is that hypocrisy argument that just kept coming up again and again in the replies. The source also points to another online phenomenon: the community note. Apparently, a note got added to her post, pointing out that the Obama administration had officially labeled Maduro a threat to U.S. national security. This is used as even more evidence to publicly undermine the foundation of her statement. So as you can probably tell by now, this whole thing, according to the source, isn't really about just one social media post. They're using this specific incident to paint a much broader picture about two competing political philosophies. So wrapping it all up, the final argument from the source is that this whole episode boils down to a simple contrast: weakness versus strength.
They frame Harris's position as weak, and they contrast it with Trump's America First approach, which they paint as decisive and strong. They even claim this approach is popular with key voting groups and that it's time for real-world consequences for bad people, not just more diplomatic letters.
And that really leaves us with a pretty big question to think about. When a politician says something today, how much does what their own administration did yesterday or last year actually matter? In our crazy fast news cycle, does a past policy record still affect someone's credibility in the present moment?